Hello and welcome to my workshop. So we're starting a new project here, and we have quite a build, a lot of really nice parts on here. But what we're going to be doing is focus on getting an interior and kind of getting some of the finished touches in the bed. Alright, so let's get started. So this truck is for a friend of mine, and it's came to me, as you see it here, with the body already weathered, the cage, and most of the components mounted. And so what I'm going to be doing for him is, providing an interior, building a kind of a bed section in the rear the best I can around the cage, and just doing some of the finish up, the touches to get this truck going down the road. The way the cab slips over the cage and the back piece has to be angled in. You can't just put this all down in one piece. There's no way to really attach it. And so I thought, well, the best way to do it is just to create some magnets. So what I'm doing there is basically putting in some pieces and adding magnets, and that way I can it'll snap together once it's in position. There's not a whole lot of room in the back. There's a lot of cage, there's a lot of stuff going on, but I was wanting to basically come up with something back there. And the idea is, have some kind of a diamond plate, wood, and some place to hold the battery. So I just started, kind of throwing boxes together, modifying, getting this thing, to fit in the space that I have available. As you can see, it's not only, you have to worry about where the cage is and having the fitment right, but then you also have to worry about the truck cycling. So you can't just build something, then all of a sudden when the shocks compress, it's going to hit. So you have to really take into consideration all that, which means taking the shocks apart, getting the thing together, putting it back together, trying it out, taking it apart again. So it's a lot of back and forth. So these are just little side pieces, and so my idea is I'll have that center box that'll be in there, and then I'll have these side pieces that'll attach, and I'll be able to have the back part open and flex enough to get around the cage there. Something I've been doing a lot here lately is using these cutters, and they're really good quality side cutter. And basically, instead of trying to take a razor knife and cut that really tight circle out, I just took the side cutters, chopped as much of it away as I could, and come in with the Dremel tool and sanded it back to the line. And it's so much quicker than trying to do that with a razor blade. So after I got the box together, I decided, it'd be nice to have some tail lights in this thing. So what I decided to do is basically kind of create this little almost sub box in the back to house the lights. And to be able to get to them, I would just basically have a piece that bolts in from underneath that covers up all the wiring and such. And so you won't really see any of that part. So the lights I'm using are from Axial. They're the through mount lights, and so they're made to kind of sandwich in between probably Lexan, but they'll work on styrene just fine as long as it's not too thick. And so you just have to get the hole cut out just right. You put one piece behind, one piece in the front, you put the screw in, and it gives a really nice oval light. And they work well for these little tail lights on these kind of trucks. So again, here's where I'm had the thicker piece of styrene that's glued to that little L-shape cover, and basically drill holes in there and just run some screws up into there from the bottom, and that holds it all in place. And it's just there basically to hide the wires. Yeah, so once I got this box built and started looking at it, and I realized it's really not that deep, and it's not going to hold much, much of a battery. Not going to be able to get much of one in there anyway, but that's just kind of the nature of the way this build is. So there was some space that I wasn't utilizing, that in front of the axle and kind of above where the drive shaft would go. So essentially what I did is just cut the bottom out of the box and make it a little small sub box that bolts right out, or glues right underneath the bottom, and just gives you a little extra space to put a bigger battery in. So as mentioned on the top, I wanted to have some kind of wood on there. I normally use a pine floor from a dollhouse, and it comes in these big large sheets, and with everything going on, I just wouldn't find any of that right now. So I did find this balsa wood, which actually worked fairly well. It gives a little bit of a different look. So just taking a piece of square styrene, I think it was 80 thousandths square, and basically just gluing it around the top part of that box. And what that does is gives us a place to rest that cover down on. So I just purchased this diamond plate from RC 4-wheel drive, and it was for another project, but I figured, this is a good opportunity to use this. And so basically just cutting out a chunk of this to go over the top of that bed structure. It will cut with scissors, but I found it a little bit easier to cut with the shears or the tin snips. Just to give it a good interest look, I basically just took some dark stain and stained the the wood on the top. So to be able to pull the lid up out of there, I used this fabric material, and essentially I just glued down one side, gave it a little bit of a length enough to grab it with your finger, and then glued it back on itself. And then when you push that down into the box, it basically makes a little tab where you can grab. So it's just simple LEDs in the rear. You can use many numbers of calculators online. You put in your voltages and everything, different parameters, and it tells you what resistor to use. You pop that in, and it's so simple to hook these things up. What I typically do is just run it straight off your ESC, and you're going to have a bind or an auxiliary plug. There's basically power, ground and power on two of those wires. The other is signal. So just tap into those two wires, and then you can use your lights. So I did use a red LED here. I also painted the lens, which are clear, with a automotive red taillight paint, I guess is what it is. And so you could probably just use a clear one if you painted it, but it does really give it that extra deep red color if you do use a red LED. So we went back and forth on the interior, and we're kind of thinking of how to get this thing set up, and it just didn't make sense to spend a lot of time and effort to create a new interior when, you know, RC 4-wheel drive sells a very detailed one that I could modify. So the nice part about this is that it's I don't think it's styrene. I think it's an ABS, but ABS and styrene are very similar in how they are bonded with solvent glues and how they interact with sanding and stuff like that. So these are really nice kits, and because they work well with styrene, you can basically do a lot with them and modify them to your needs. So here I'm using some E6000 to glue in that back window. So I just got the plastic that slots down in, and I'm taking a little toothpick and carefully placing a little bit dab of that E6000 in a couple spots around. And that's really all you need to hold that in. So I first went with a paint out of just a rattle can. Just wasn't happy with the color, so I custom mixed a color and airbrushed that on. And then I decided, I wanted a little accent to kind of make the things kind of stand out. And that's really kind of how the real ones are. You have a lighter color, and then like the armrest and the top of the arm and different places are a darker shade of the same color. So I basically took that exact same paint I just got through airbrushing and added a lot of black into it just to darken it up some. And then I come back and put those accents on, and it really does add a lot visually. You can see there's a lot of little tiny parts in here, and you can see it's a very detailed dash, especially for the price. I think it's around $40, which is not bad for all you get. The other nice thing about this, it comes with a sticker kit for the gauge cluster there, and it's really detailed, really looks nice. But it also comes with these little metal overlays, which have almost like a brushed accent to it. I could say that you probably may not want to use this all the time, but I think it worked out pretty well in this, and I put some of them on, and it really does add a lot of texture to the dash, a lot of detail. What I didn't cover here is a step for getting the carpet in. It's basically flocking. I had a little bit of trouble with that. I think it's my second time doing this, and what I didn't realize is how thin it would be, and it would actually be able to see the different colors. So when I was painting, I didn't pay a whole lot of attention to where the paint oversprayed where the floor was. I know it was going to do flocking, and you could see that. So I ended up having to come back and once I had a little bit of the flocking down, is paint that black. and then come back with the flocking. So so that's something you want to think about if you're going to do the flocking, is to make sure you get a good dark color that complements the material you're going to be using. So one of the things that that happened kind of mid-build is a wheel and tire change, and so they went from there's some pretty fancy looking Vanquish wheels with some pretty realistic tires to these very large wheels, but I think are very appropriate for the build. And so, I was a little nervous about getting the interior in. So the only major issue I had was I had to mirror the transmission and then cut a little section out in the back where that would allow it to go up into the seat. So the other part was, where to mount the electronics. And there's not a whole lot going on in this. I mean, it's really pretty much a bare bones system. So you have, a receiver and a speed controller, and that's really all you have to find a place for. So in the cage, there was a spot up front that just seemed like a natural place. And so I just basically took a piece of styrene, kept trimming it and cutting it down till it was fit in between there, drilled a couple holes and zip tied it to the roll cage there. It's a very simple little mount, and then you can just basically, put your speed controller and a receiver down on that, and then it's nice thing. It's up forward, it's up high. I doubt this thing will ever see any mud or water, but if it is, it's out of the way. So I cut that hole in the interior for the transmission to clear, and it didn't need a lot. It was wasn't sticking through the interior much, because these interiors are pushed up pretty high, but I did have to come up with something to cover up the hole that's in the seat now. So what I decided to do was build an apple crate and use that to haul, basically to store some tools. So I never tried this technique before, and I think there's some kind of a Japanese word for it, which I have no idea how to pronounce, but it's essentially burning the wood. And so I just took my little torch and I burned the wood, and it gives that aged look to it. And I think it really worked well for this, and it's pretty simple anyway. So after the electronics were in, mounted, everything was ready to go, the kind of last bit was to do some lights up front, and then to be able to tie all that in to the lights in the rear. And like I said, I come off of the auxiliary or the bind plug on the receiver to get power for that. So what I really like to do if possible is just recrimp the connections and remake like the JST plugs with instead of trying to solder pieces together, you can buy the kits and the proper crimper to actually make all those ends yourself, and that seems to work out really well. And I also did the same thing with making the plug that goes into the receiver. the last thing to do was to weather up the wheels. You know, they're bright and shiny. The truck was weathered and it had that look. So basically just taking some different washes and applying that to the wheels and getting them dirty and wiping off a bit. And that's about it. It's not a whole lot to that.